Hello everyone and welcome to our session number 2 of our quantitative techniques paper number 2. In this session we are going to have a discussion on sampling, and of course we are continuing from the session we had previously that was talking about data collection, in which we gave a definition of data. We also gave the types of data. We talked about the sources of data, and the types of data we said we had primary data and secondary data. And of course, we went ahead to have a discussion on the data collection methods like observation, questionnaires, and interviews. So in this session, we are proceeding with our paper, the online lectures, and we are going to talk about sampling. So in this session, we are going to, of course, give a definition of sampling. We are going to give other key definitions under sampling. We are going to give reasons for sampling. We are going to talk about the probability sampling methods, and then we shall wind up our discussion with the non-probability sampling method. So in our introduction in Unit 2, we are going to, of course, appreciate the concept of sampling. So here we are saying sampling is simply a process where we select a sufficient number of elements from the population so that by studying the sample and understanding the properties and characteristics of the sample subjects, we are in position, or it would be possible, to generate the properties or characteristics of the entire population, or what we call the population elements. So when you look at our definition here, we are talking about elements and we are talking about the sample subjects. So ideally, we are saying sampling, we are selecting members who we call the subjects from the elements, and the elements belong to the population, whereas the subjects belong to the sample. So why would we go into this kind of exercise? Of course, in most cases, the population is so large that you may not really be in position to have enough time to inquire from all of them. So you select a few members of the sample, and then by studying these members of the sample, you are in position to look at the properties and characteristics of the sample subjects. So the properties and characteristics of the sample subjects will ideally reflect the properties and characteristics of the population. So if I can illustrate this, on one part we have the population elements, and on the other part we have the sample subjects. So sampling ideally is the process of selecting members from the population and they become members of the sample. And of course, in brackets here, we are saying the members of the sample are the subjects and the members of the population are the elements. So you're going to meet other key definitions in this unit, and one of those is the sample. Of course, we have already said the sample comes from the population, therefore the sample is a subset of the population. It comprises of some members selected from the population, and we are giving an example where 200 members are drawn from a population of 1,000. The 200 form what we call the sample of the study. And by studying the sample, one would be able to draw conclusions that are general to the entire population. So the characteristics of the sample will reflect the characteristics of the entire bigger population. The other key term you're going to meet in this unit is population, which refers to the entire group of people, events, or things of interest that one wishes to investigate. The other key definition you should not take for granted is the element. And as we have already discussed in our definition, we are saying an element is a single member of the population. On the next slide, we have more definitions here, like census. Census is where we take on account of all elements of the population. And then the population frame, definitely, which we call the survey population, is a full list of all elements in the population from which the sample is drawn. So this is a list, like if we are talking about employees, the sample, the population frame can be the payroll, okay? The payroll would serve as a population frame if its members are to be studied, and the members of the payroll are the employees that we want to make a study on. And the other key definition is the subject. A subject, as we have mentioned in our discussion, is a single member of the sample, and just like an element is a single member of the population. Parameter is another definition that you need to take care of and appreciate before going for the exam. Parameters, these are the characteristics that are general to the entire population, and of course they include the mean, population standard deviation, and the variance. Now, when we talk of parameters, of course we are talking about a number of things. Parameters, we can talk about age, we can talk about the color, we can talk about the weight, we can talk about the income levels. So a parameter, we simply take it as a characteristic that is general to the entire population. So it can be the average age, can be the average height, can be the average weight. Okay, it can be the standard deviation weight, standard deviation height, and so on and so forth. Of course, those are some of the key definitions, and again, we are saying that you need to prepare for this exam, and therefore you need to appreciate the reasons why sampling is key. Okay, why we do sampling. So here we have the reasons for sampling in our slide, and we are saying sampling is justified because resources, okay, resources in particular time and money, are often not adequate to cover the entire population. So when you sample, you save time and money. Next, we are saying sampling is justified in situations where the results of the inquiry are required immediately. So you need to save some time to do the following: carry out checks and counter checks in terms of accuracy, to collect more elaborate information, and to give more time for analysis and interpretation of results. So those are some of the reasons why we may go into sampling in the interest of time where the results are required immediately. Next, sampling is justified because sometimes it is not possible to inquire from the entire population. Okay, not all respondents are willing to give you responses, so you may not inquire from the entire population. Next, we're saying sampling is important because it actually achieves better response rates than an attempt to the entire complete coverage of the population. And then we are saying the use of sampling will permit you to employ highly qualified personnel, which translates into greater degree of accuracy. Finally, we are saying that a well-designed, scientifically drawn sample coupled with a well-conducted survey will produce results significantly close to the population characteristics with no statistical difference. So those are some of the reasons why we go into sampling. So what are some of the sampling methods, techniques, or designs? So here we are saying, one, before you select a method or technique or design, there are some considerations that you need to make. Two of them: one, avoidance of bias in selecting the sample, and then achievement of maximum precision in the results for a given cost outlay. And of course, how does bias come in? Bias comes in especially if we are dealing with a non-random method used in selecting our respondents, or if the sampling frame is actually incomplete or inadequate. So as you select the sampling method, you must be mindful of these two major things: avoidance of doubt or bias, and achievement of maximum precision in the results for a given cost outlay. So again, bias may come in if members are selected into the sample, decline to be interviewed, or cannot be actually traced. So in that way, you have some kind of bias coming in. All right. So what are the methods of sampling? So there are basically two major recognized sampling designs or methods. And the first one is what we say is the probability sampling, and the second one is what we call the non-probability sampling approaches. So in the probability sampling methods on the next slide, we are talking about the methods in which, okay, the elements of the population have some known chance or probability of being selected as sample subjects. So you are in position to calculate the chance that a certain member of the population is going to be selected into the sample. So if that is the kind of the approach, then that one is known as a probability sampling method. So we are saying that probability sampling method is divided into two. It can either be unrestricted, what we mainly call simple random sampling, or it can be restricted, what we call the complex probability sampling. The choice of any of these two probability sampling methods or approaches will depend on a number of things, and here we're saying the nature of the research problem, the availability of the good sampling frame, the money, the resources and time, the desired level of accuracy in the sample, and the data collection methods. So in all cases, there are advantages and disadvantages of each. So we are looking at the different methods under the probability sampling category, and one of those, as we have mentioned, is simple random sampling. We have systematic random sampling technique, and then we have stratified random sampling. We have random group sampling technique. We have multi-stage cluster sampling, among the many others. So for the purpose of your exam, you're going to be examined on these five major probability sampling methods. So we are going to look at one by one. One by one, we are going to be going through what all these methods are all about. Under simple random sampling, of course, here we are saying under this technique, as the word goes, it is a random one. And of course, in the technique, each person has some chance as any other of being selected into the sample, and forms a standard against which all other methods are evaluated. So it is one of those methods that will feed into the other. And of course, as the word goes, it is a random one, okay? It is a random, someone that is interested in drawing a sample from the population will randomly select any member in the population. So all the persons in the population have a chance of being selected as members of the sample. So we are going to say that this technique is suitable where the population is relatively small and where the sampling frame is complete and up to date. So you remember what we said, a sampling frame is a list of all members in the population. So the sampling frame must be complete. Otherwise, if it is incomplete, then the other chance we are talking about, the probability that everyone has a chance of being selected, will not be workable. So we continue by saying that it may be done with or without replacement. And of course, I'm going to show you at the end of this video that I've included a full and detailed discussion in the notes. So please try to upload the notes, because in my slides I give summaries and briefs plus explanations on the subject. So we continue by talking about the second technique under probability sampling, which is systematic random sampling. Under systematic random sampling, we are saying that it is similar to the simple random sampling, but instead of selecting random numbers from tables, you move through a list, which you call a sample frame, picking the nth name. To choose the nth name, one must work out the appropriate sampling fraction. Okay, you must work out the appropriate sampling fraction by dividing the sample size, the population size, with the required sample size. So in this one, I'm giving an example of how it is done. So we are looking at a population of 600 employees, and we have a required sample of 120 employees. So we are asking ourselves, how will the sampling fraction be computed or determined? So what we do, we get the 120 sample size, divide with the 600 population size. So that's what we are doing here in our fraction, and definitely we get 1/5. So 1/5 is a simple fraction for 120 over 600. So it implies that here, what we are saying, this implies that the person choosing the sample from the population must build up his or her sample size by selecting one person out of 5 in the population. So we count 5 and select 1. We count 5 and select 1. We count 5 and select, we bundle 5, select 1. So that is exactly how the method works. So we are saying that the sample fraction error is important in this case since it helps in determining the starting point when choosing the sample out of the population. Okay. Next, on slide number 20, we have the third method, which is the stratified random sampling. And here we are saying in this method, all people in the sampling frame are divided into groups or categories that we refer to as strata. Now, within each stratum, or what we call a group, a simple random sample or systematic random sample is selected or drawn. So we divide population into the number of categories you want. It may be in terms of gender, it may be in terms of color, it may be in terms of weight. So whichever way you want to categorize the groups, there you divide and form what you call strata. We are giving an example here that consider a group of 50 employees comprising of 22 male and 28 female. Assuming a sample of 5 employees is required from the sample, they want us to compute the number of males and females that will be included in the sample, ensuring equitable selection of each. So here the strata, we are using gender. We are looking at the male and the female. The employees are 50. So using stratified sampling, the number of males in the sample will be 5 over 50 times the 22 we want. Okay, so we need 5 employees. They are 50, and of course 22 are the male, and of course that gives us 2.2 employees. And then number of males, this is supposed to be number of females, because the females, we can change it to females. My handwriting is not good here. Females. So this is supposed to be females. So if you want the number of females, we get 5. Okay. Remember, 5 are the employees we want. Out of 50, the total number of employees times 28 females in the company. So that gives us 2.8 employees. Now here we continue by saying that since we can't have 0.2 and 0.8 of a person, we round off upwards and downwards respectively. So number of males, we round off downwards. Those are 2 males. And then number of females are going to be 3. So in total, you will have 2 male and 3 female in your stratified random sample. So that is how the stratified random sampling works. And of course, you continue to read the detailed notes I've given you. And here we are saying, that the 2 and the 3 will then be selected by simple random sampling or systematic random sampling. All right. Number 4, we have random root sampling technique. And we are saying this is a technique used in market research surveys, used for sampling household, shops, other premises in rural and urban areas. In this method, an address is selected at random from a sampling frame, usually electoral register, as a starting point. Then, given instructions, the person collecting data identifies more addresses by taking alternative left and right turns at road junctions and calling at every nth address. Can be a shop or a premise. So this is some kind of a wider sampling method that is used in market research. All right, number 5, we have the multi-stage cluster sampling. And of course, we are saying this involves drawing several samples known as sample areas. These sample areas are progressively reduced into smaller areas by choosing smaller sample areas from the larger sample areas. Eventually, smaller areas end up into sample households, and by using an appropriate method, using systematic or simple random sampling method, individuals are selected from those households. Again, this one is a more wider kind of sampling method that is used in market research. And of course, we keep on reducing the sample areas, okay, and then the end objective is to select individuals from the unit, which are the households. In the case of the non-probability sampling methods, you can make use of the following that are going to be examined. Of course, we begin by saying that these are techniques applied when it becomes impossible to undertake a probability method of sampling. This may be due to the following reasons. One, unavailability, okay, unavailability of a complete sampling frame for a certain population. It can also be because the probability sampling method adopted has failed to produce good response rates, thereby failing to give a good representation of the population being examined. So if those are the prevailing conditions, it means that you cannot use the probability sampling method you have just discussed, and therefore you have to resort to the non-probability sampling methods. So the non-probability sampling method you're going to be examined on include purposive sampling, okay? We have quarter sampling, we have convenience sampling, we have snowball sampling, we have self-selection, and of course these are all explained in the notes I've given you, which I've downloaded, and also explained in my slides that follow. So purposive sampling, we are saying, is one which is selected subjectively. The person collecting data in this case obtains a sample that appears to be representative of the population, and will usually try to ensure that a range from one extreme to the other is included. So we do some kind of purposive. For example, if you want to collect information on finance, you cannot go to a person that is an engineer. You have to purposively select the finance persons. If you want information regarding a certain disease, or how to cure a certain disease, you have to go to a medical practitioner. That would be the best person to give you right responses. So you purposively select these people, okay? Next, we have quarter sampling. We are saying that this is often used in market survey research, where the person collecting data is required to find cases with particular characteristics. The person collecting data is given a quota of particular types of people to select from, and the quota is organized so as the final sample should be representative of the population. Like in market research, if you want to look at, if you're doing research on people taking cigarettes or taking alcohol, you will have to basically get that quota, okay? They'll get people who are facing that very particular case. So those will be what we may call quotas. So that from as we select from those quotas, we are able to get the population or the sample that represents the population. Convenience, of course, as the word goes, convenience in this method, the sample comprises of subjects who are simply available in a convenient way to the person collecting data, okay? There are no randomness, and the likelihood of a bias is very, very high with this method. So you just do things in your convenient kind of way. Those that are near you are the ones you're going to include in your sample. So we continue by saying that one cannot draw meaningful conclusions from the results you obtain. However, this method is often the only feasible one, particularly in situations where time and resources are constrained. You may really not have enough resources and time, and therefore you have to do things in the most convenient kind of way. Again, we have number 4, snowball sampling. With this approach, you initially contact a few potential respondents, okay? Initially contact a few potential respondents and then ask whether they know anybody with the same characteristics that you are looking for in your study. So they will give you a number of people that really have what you need, and then you can select from those submissions given to you. Lastly, we have self-selection, and as it goes, and its name goes, This is the approach in which respondents select themselves. They decide that they would like to take part in your studies. So they will simply come to your approach and say, we've heard you're doing this kind of study. We want to contribute. We want to be part of the respondents to add to value to your research. So basically, there are a number of advantages of the non-probability sampling methods, which I want you to really consider and prepare for as you're preparing for the exam. One of those is that non-probability sampling methods are cheap. Okay, they are cheap. They are used when sampling frame is not available. They are useful when the population is widely dispersed. They are often used in exploratory studies, that is for hypothesis generation. And of course, the disadvantages are there. As I've mentioned, I've given a full discussion in the notes that you have just downloaded. If you have not yet downloaded, please try to download the notes and try to read on these methods. If you find there is anything that is not familiar, anything that you're not understanding, then please drop me a comment as you're taking this lecture. Drop me an email, send me WhatsApp, so that I'm in position to respond and be able to give you um, more clearer explanations. Of course, for purposes of assurance, I have here the Word document, which I've already sent to you in PDF format, which is chapter number 2. So in this chapter, you see that the notes have really detailed this discussion. So I want you to refer to this. Try to get the advantages, disadvantages of each of these methods, how each of these sampling methods work, and of course prepare for the exam. Of course, again, you will see that I've added the role of sampling in auditing. You can refer to this for purposes of enhancing your understanding of sampling. Again, the notes I've sent you wind up with an exercise. This exercise, I've picked questions from past papers, okay? Like, of course, question number 1, you can see the examiner wanted candidates to distinguish between sample and the population, element and subject, population frame and population parameter. Again, in one of the questions that has been said before, the examiner wanted you to outline the 4 methods that can be used or employed in collection of primary data, explain the 3 demerits and merits of each technique, so on and so forth. So try out these. If there's any question you may not be in position to attempt, I can always come in and give you some support and assistance. For now, I want you to move to chapter 3, 4, and 5, where we are going to talk about the measures of central location, measures of dispersion, measures of skewness. And of course, I'll take you to the lecture room where we shall do some numbers. We calculate the mean, mode, median, we shall calculate the range, we shall be able to calculate the quartiles, we shall be able to calculate positive skewness, negative skewness, and give appropriate comments. From the measures of central location, dispersion, and skewness, we shall move into probability, where we shall talk about binomial, we shall talk about discrete probability, we shall talk about events like independent events. So we are going to be moving at a very fast rate, and of course try to check your account time and again, ensure that you don't miss out on the lectures that are going to be coming on. And of course, as you know, time is running, and as we are moving towards the